think we can start now, and I'm sure as people arrive, we will be very happy to welcome them. Anyway, let us kick off today. Thank you so much for joining us. As I said, we'll be talking about the EB-5 and pathways to the education in the US. I'm joined today by lovely colleagues of mine, Christina Lebedeva, who is our US education consultant, and Shalu, who is private client advisor and also heads up the EB-5 program at Henley and Partners. So a wealth of information here. Now, before I forget, please drop in questions as we go through this. You'll see we have a Q&A, and we will either pick them up and answer them as we go through, but most likely we're going to address the majority of them at the end in our Q&A, but it's very important you put them in, so please feel free. And this is what we'll be covering today. You'll see there'll be an awful lot. My name is Tess Wilkinson. I'm Director of Education at Henley and Partners, and I think we're going to kick off really with couple of things. One is this is the first of a webinar series that we're doing around higher education and around the world. So you can see there are dates here where we're going to be addressing additional destinations. So feel free to join if you're curious or would like to know more. But first of all, I just wanted to sort of start off by addressing the sort of global trends that we're seeing in education. And currently, well, obviously we're starting with the US because that is a topic for today. And anyone who watches the news knows that there are some significant shifts going on at the moment. And you have without doubt heard that there was a pause in the student visa interviews, but they've now started again. But things have changed because the visa processing and security checks are more stringent. They're looking at social media, which is quite an interesting one. There are still backlogs, still wait times for students trying to get appointments. We've seen a predicted drop in the amount of international enrollments, and we're pretty certain that there will be students who were looking at the US who are going to be considering other destinations. And this is all understandable for families who've got children who want some security with the choices they're making. But as you can see at the bottom, this is really important. What we're here today to do is to, give you pathways, because the US is still the home to probably the best universities in the world, or many of them. It's still a dream for many students to be able to study there. And there are options and ways around what's going on in a moment, which Shalu is going to be addressing later in this webinar. But as you can see, if you hold permanent residency before applying, which is what the EB-5 can allow you to do, then you're not an international student and you are not you don't have to face these challenges. So, and then lastly, of course, this is a fluid situation and we're not too sure where it will go. Things will change. What else is going on in the world? Well, it's not just the US. Everywhere is seeing a change. Australia, there's an increase in fees. We know that there are policy shifts and the visa rules are now tighter. And we know that there are stricter post-study rights. The UK is also looking at changing the graduate route, and there are tighter visa rules for dependents. But the UK is also seeing an uptick in interest because of students who are considering the UK rather than the US. And it also has fantastic universities. We're seeing a predicted fall of about 50% in the number of new international students in Canada. And again, that is due to visa changes and various caps and numbers that are coming in. And then Europe is an interesting one because it's really being proactive in its strategy to attract students and is opening doors, or many universities in the Netherlands and Germany and France, etc., who are opening doors to students who have had plans interrupted by what's been going on in the US. And again, it has some fantastic fantastic universities there. And then there are new destinations emerging, which is really interesting. And this is mainly impacting students in Asia, but there are more and more options in Japan, South Korea, and of course the UAE, which has a growing number of not only wealthy people and fantastic universities setting up shop there, but they are really becoming interesting in their quality. So, and Singapore, again, it's got one of the top 5 universities, NUS, based there. So there's some really interesting, it's a really interesting landscape, let's put it that way, that we're looking at the moment. But today's webinar is all about the US and the fact that, you know, all three of us, Shalu, Christina and I, are still absolutely convinced that it's a fantastic option and a totally possible option. And that is why we're here to talk through all of this and to show you, you know, the steps to take and how we can help you. Now, I'm going to pass over on that note to Christina. I'll be changing the slides, so do forgive everyone for saying next slide, please, because we have to do it this way. So Christina, over for you. I'm going to mute myself and I'll let you carry on. Thank you, everyone. And don't forget the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Tess. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here today to speak about something I've dedicated my career to, which is the US college admissions and long-term academic strategy. I must say that the US college admission system is like no other. It doesn't just look at what you've achieved. It asks you who you are, what you stand for, and what kind of impact you want to make. And that's really what makes it so competitive, but also so exciting. It's no surprise that many of the world's most prestigious universities, just like Tess said, are led by the US institutions, which still reflects their global reputation for academic excellence and innovation. But to succeed, students need more than just grades. They need vision, authenticity, and support. Also, obviously, given the many geopolitical challenges we face today, clarity is more important than ever, and that's exactly what we're here to help provide. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Christina. I'm Global Education Advisor at Henley & Partners and based in Switzerland. And for over a decade now, I've worked with internationally mobile families who view education not just as something to achieve, but rather one of the most important long-term investments they can ever make. And over the years, I've also had the chance to travel across the US extensively, visiting leading universities and understanding campus cultures, building institutional relationships, and visiting my students. My own academic background spans economics, international relations, and philosophy. I'm currently a postgraduate student at the University of Cambridge, and I've completed training in psychology and coaching at the University of Oxford. But most importantly, I help students find and own their unique path that is so important for the US admissions process. This year alone, students I've guided received offers from top US institutions, including UC Berkeley, UCLA, NYU, Georgetown University, Northeastern, and Boston University, and many others. Each story is really the result of strategic planning, personal clarity, and a deep understanding of fit, which we will discuss a bit later. Next slide, please. So what makes US admissions so distinct is its holistic nature. This isn't a process that evaluates just numbers or achievements, it assesses the whole person. So universities are asking questions like, what matters to the student? Or how do they think? Or how do they contribute to their communities? This is why I always say, US admissions is not logistical. It's psychological and very strategic. It's about identifying your story, your strengths, and how you translate that into a voice that admissions committees will remember. The strongest applications are never generic. What I've noticed is that they are always deeply personal, reflective, and intentional. And my role here is obviously to help each student uncover that story and express it authentically. Next slide, please. Now let's compare. For instance, the UK degree is like a set menu. You pick up your subject and follow the path. The US is more of a buffet. You explore, sample, and then specialize. What it means is that students can shift direction, combine majors and minors, and evolve their academic identity as they mature. And personally, I deeply value this flexibility of the US system because students aren't forced into rigid tracks. They explore, evolve, change direction, and that, I believe, is this system's strongest strengths because it respects the fact that many 17-year-olds are still becoming who they are. Next slide, please. Thank you. And now it is very important to understand that the US curriculum encourages interdisciplinary thinking. It is not uncommon for a student in computer science to take philosophy or for a business major to study global health or data science. This model doesn't just build specialists. It really builds leaders who can think across disciplines, who can collaborate in complex environments and adapt to change. It also is one of the reasons why US graduates are so sought after globally. And it's still the case. They're not only academically strong, they're very intellectually agile. Next slide, please. And now we come to fit. I believe fit is one of the most critical, but also misunderstood concepts in the US admissions process. Every top college in the US is looking for students who are a good fit for them, not just academically, but in terms of mindset, strategy, values. For example, Harvard always seeks for intellectual intensity. Brown embraces freedom and independence. NYU thrives on energy, diversity, and ambition. A student might be qualified for many schools on paper, but where will they thrive? And that's what fit is all about. It's about culture, community, shared ethos, and also finding that match is one of the most rewarding parts of this process. Next slide, please. Now, every university has a distinct voice, as I mentioned. The application really prompts themselves reveal what they value: creativity, humor, depth, leadership. Compare this to examples. Yale asks about your dream course, your favorite speaker, and your untold story, while USC asks about snacks, books, songs, and travel. Both are valid, but widely different in style. And this tells you everything about their culture and what kind of student they want to welcome. Next slide, please. So, the top US universities continue to be extraordinarily selective. Take Harvard, for example. Over 60,000 applicants each year. Acceptance rate just above 3%. Only about 2,000 places. It's incredibly competitive, which is why early planning, thoughtful positioning, and authentic storytelling are critical. And it's not just Harvard. This applies across top-tier US schools. Next slide, please. And let me put it into perspective. So this graphic tells a striking story about how student populations are distributed across top-ranked institutions worldwide. So let's take the first one, Canada, for example. Its top 5 universities enroll almost 250,000 students. In contrast, to reach the same number, you'd need to combine the top 11 universities in the UK or the top 25 universities in the US. From this chart, you also see that only around 32,000 students in the US attend its top 5 universities, a fraction when you compare to countries like Brazil, South Africa, or China. The US model really prizes depth over scale, and that makes, again, strategic planning and institutional fit absolutely essential. Next slide, please. Wonderful. So from here you can see that the US has over 4.3 million school leavers each year. If just 1% of them apply to elite schools, that's already over 40,000 applicants. When there are only 1,600 places at Harvard or approximately 300 at Caltech, you understand the scale of challenge. So what does that mean for you? It tells us that elite universities in the US are intentionally small. They are highly selective, not just because of academic excellence, but because they are built around mentorship, access to faculty, and personalized academic communities. And now again, this is where expert guidance really makes the difference. Not only in identifying the right university, but also in helping you stand out in an applicant pool where everyone is exceptional. So rather than chasing acceptance, I encourage my students to build a thoughtful, balanced school list, one that can help them be ambitious, but also grounded in self-awareness and fit. Next slide, please. Now, a top 50 university is not a generic label. Each college has a signature model. For example, Columbia's core curriculum, or Brown's open curriculum, or Northeastern's co-op system, or Stanford's emphasis on innovation and entrepreneurship. Understanding these models really helps students see beyond prestige and focus on experience. So when families work with us, we dive deep into the academic and cultural DNA of each school. So each final application reflects alignment and not just aspiration, which is in many cases a common mistake. And that leads us to our next slide, please. So now, what goes wrong? I must say that over the years, I've seen a few patterns repeat. Mistakes that can quietly undermine even the strongest applicants. First, obviously, starting too late. Success, especially in the US admissions, comes from vision. And I always encourage families to plan early. Ideally, we need at least 18 to 24 months before applications. And that really allows space for meaningful growth, thoughtful reflection, and crafting an application that will truly represent the best version of the student. Because bear in mind that the admission cycle starts almost a year in advance. So 18 to 24 months before this admission cycle starts, we need to already be prepared with this vision. Second, I would say, is focusing only on brand names. It's a very common one. Yes, prestige matters, but the right fit matters much more. The third one, I would say, thinking scores are everything. Academics are essential, but they're just one part of this holistic review of the US college applications. Then I would say underestimating extracurriculars. It's always either too many or too few. And I always say that selective universities in the US, they want depth, leadership, and impact beyond classroom, but it has to be a very strategic list of activities rather than just too many of them. And finally, I would say the very important one is that the families are not involving their children in the process enough. Here's the thing, US universities expect independence and agency. So when students aren't part of the journey, they can't demonstrate true ownership of their applications. And this needs to be their path, not a project managed by parents. That's how real growth and real motivation happen. And then admissions committees, they are really looking for this ownership, this authenticity and direction, and they can really see it from the applications that are being submitted. I would say that really without those, even the strongest profile can fall flat. And next slide, please. So now a lot of information, but what can you do? I would say that this slide I prepared for you to really give you an action plan. It's a roadmap to help your child not only become a competitive applicant, but a purposeful one. So as I just said, US universities are looking for engaged, curious students, the future change makers. So exploration is key here. What you can do is encourage your child to be curious. It's essential. They need to be curious both academically and personally. This is the time to try things from business and science to law, design, global affairs, philosophy. Let them just test drive their interests. Summer programs, I always say it's a fantastic way to do this because they give students real exposure to university life, understanding what colleges are like, what is that fit that we discussed earlier, and this can provide real clarity about their future direction. Engage. Why? Because selective US universities are looking for that real engagement from the student. That means not just participating in activities, but building something really meaningful. Now, it could be independent research, community work, starting a small venture, or going deeper into something they love. And here, campus visits that we do with our families, open days, faculty engagement are equally valuable because they help students identify what kind of community they want to join and how to articulate that in their applications. Prepare. Most families I work with underestimate how early preparation needs to begin. And we always tell our families that having a long-term strategy means fewer last-minute decisions and more intentional growth and planning. But what's the most powerful piece? I think that it is developing an authentic voice. That is what truly makes applicants stand out. It's not perfection. I would say it's more about clarity of purpose and a sense of ownership of those applications. And finally, behind every successful application, there is a team. The US admission process, as you understood, is really complex, highly personal, and incredibly competitive. So today, with all the geopolitical shifts, changing visa regulations, and an atmosphere of, I would say, tremendous global uncertainty, it all has just added a new layer of stress and anxiety for our families. But we are here to guide you, and we're here to ensure stability, access, and opportunity over long term for you. And that's why families are thinking more strategically than ever. And also what we're seeing is combining educational planning with residency options like the US EB-5 program, which my colleague is going to speak about next. Shalu, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tess. Thank you so much, Christina. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Shalu Hasram. I'm actually a private client advisor. I'm based in Singapore, and I'm also responsible for overseeing the US EB-5 program. So just to actually, recap basically what Tess has actually mentioned about, the current scenario, what international students are facing. And I actually wanted to just paint the picture in light of what is actually happening in the context of EB-5. So, as you're aware, every day we seem to be getting a headline thanks to Donald Trump. And with most recently, what has happened is that firstly, there was a halt in student visa interviews. And although that has resumed right now, we are also seeing tremendous social media wetting. And what does it mean by social media wetting? Well, for instance, like all the embassies, the foreign embassies have been advised to actually change, instruct the actual students to actually change their social media from private to public. That is number one. And what I understand, the social media vetting is actually very, very detailed. It's not just like a cursory glance. It's actually something that they go way back 10 years ago, and they even look at your deleted post. So I think this has really, caused a lot of apprehension and anxiety to a lot of clients. And I think when most clients come to Henley and Partners to navigate, the current environment, the first and foremost thing I'll definitely tell them to look at is the EB-5 program, because the EB-5 is still by far the most secure way to actually, for clients to actually secure permanent residency for their children. And, in spite of what is happening in the current environment, I would have to still say a US education is unmatched, and it is definitely the preferred education destination for a number of my clients. So just to actually state that when a client, does an EB-5 application process, we actually take them through a very comprehensive service. First, we provide education, as what Tess and Christina have been explaining. The second is the EB-5 requirements, which I'm going to touch on. And the last stage is tax and legacy planning, which is actually very, very crucial in these days. So just to onset, Henley and Partners does not offer tax advice, but we do work with the best tax and legacy planning to provide a full pre-immigration structure. So just to come back on what EB-5 actually, the program entails, it's essentially an investment of 800,000 into a regional center project. It's a commercial project that is administered by a regional center. And the whole premise of EB-5 is job creation, where an investor has to basically show a creation of full-time jobs, new full-time jobs. Next slide, please. So how does this actually work? So when a client is actually interested in EB-5, the first thing I do is I start introducing them to an immigration attorney. The USCIS, which is the US Department of Citizenship and Immigration, they want to just see where this 800,000 has come from. The USCIS is not concerned with the client's overall net worth. They are more concerned of where this particular 800,000 came from. And the lawyer has to be working with the client to, identify that the source of funds are legitimate. At the same time, while the lawyer and the client is working on that, we also have the client introduced to various regional centers. And there are more than 600 regional centers out there, but Henley and Partner works with a very select handful group of regional centers after we've done our due diligence on them. And so while the client is actually speaking to the regional centers and while they're working with the lawyers, once the client has more or less finalized a particular project, and the lawyer has given the green light as that they are satisfied with the documentation of the client would have to remit this 800,000 into the escrow account of the regional center. It is only after that that the lawyer can file the petition, what is known as the I-526E petition. So most of these funds, if in the case of international students, these are actually gifts given to them by their parents, but it could be done in various forms. It could be even a loan, but mostly parents are doing it for their children. So it is by way of gift, and the lawyers would draft a gift agreement to actually show it to the USCIS. Next slide. So when we look at EB-5, there are essentially two ways a client can actually file an EB-5 petition. The most common that has always been working is the consular processing. And this is the particular way where clients do when they are actually currently outside the United States. This is the way where you file your petition and then you wait for an interview with the US Embassy in the country that you are residing. But a huge opportunity that has actually been introduced with the current law of the EB-5 is concurrent adjustment of filing. And I think this is a very, very powerful feature used by a lot of international students who are currently already in the US, who are already studying there. And because, they want to take advantage of not only opportunities after graduation, where they can look at work opportunities after graduation. I have a lot of clients who, their children tell me as young as 18-year-olds that they are vying for, their dream internships. And it's very, very important for them to get EB-5, because when you have EB-5, right, when you have permanent residency, when you have an application, and when you tell your prospective employer that I do not need any company sponsorship whatsoever, it really puts you in a very powerful position, and you are literally on a level playing field, and you're vying for that same position as a US citizen. So I have actually seen a lot of my clients take advantage of this concurrent filing, because it is something that is available to people who are currently in the US. And if the particular student is not yet in the US, not a problem. What can happen is that they can actually go to the US as a student visa and then stay there for 90 days and then actually have their EB-5 petition filed together with this concurrent filing in 90 days. So this is something that I have to say has become a very, very important feature, and a lot of clients are actually taking advantage of it. Another thing that a lot of parents are also considering, although the normal way for actually a person to file an application is with the parent as the main and the dependent children under 21. But what I have started to increasingly see people do is that they're having their minor child as the main applicant, as the sole applicant. And this is really, really powerful, especially for, parents who are not looking to be in the application, but they just want to give their children a head start. And I have done EB-5 applications for minor as young as 13 and 14-year-olds. And this is really something that we're actually telling clients to do right now in light of all the uncertainty that is going around, where, parents have that peace of mind, where they're starting very early and giving their child a head start in life. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned to you, the two processes where we can do it, which is consular processing, which is the normal way that people do who actually live outside the US. And then obviously this adjustment of concurrent, which I've actually mentioned, it is actually something, that parents can look at. And I think this is really, really very crucial in this point in time, where a lot of students who are actually studying there, want to take advantage of opportunities after they graduate. So I think this is something that a lot of parents can look at. And this is something that is already being done by a lot of clients, children of mine. Next slide. So I can't actually talk about the gold card without even talking about, I can't talk about EB-5 without talking about Trump's gold card. As you know, that in late February, Trump actually, announced about the gold card. And there is a lot of difference between the EB-5 and the Trump gold card, because EB-5 is actually an investment that you're making, where the 800,000 is actually returned to the client after the the loan matures, which is an average term period of 5 years. But the gold card is something where Trump is actually asking somebody to make a donation of 5 million to the US government. And the whole point is really to reduce the deficit of the US economy. And the biggest carrot, I have to say, that Donald Trump is actually dangling to a lot of, ultra high net worth clients, which would find this very interesting, is that they would not be subjected to global tax. As you're aware, a US person is subjected to global tax, because in this particular Trump gold card, what they're proposing is that they would not be subjected to global tax. Whether this happens is, yet to be seen, and then it is something that the details are not yet. Although 2 weeks ago, Trump did, put up his portal where he was just, trying to see expression of interest, and people were just registering to see whether they would be interested in the gold card. But this is the details, the full details of the gold card are yet to be disclosed. Next slide. So just to recap, the US gold card is actually a 5 million donation. I think the most important thing I wanted to highlight is that, Trump actually made a statement when he actually launched the gold card, was that they were looking to actually replace the EB-5 program. And I will want to clarify here that this is something that would not be very easily to do. You just cannot replace the EB-5 program. And the reason is because in the year 2022, the Biden administration reauthorized this EB-5 program into law, and Congress has passed this into legislation. And only Congress has the authority to basically change or amend and to propose any new laws related to immigration. So for Trump to actually say that he would, look to replace the EB-5 program is not something that is so easy, because this is only Congress can actually do that. And I would actually like to share some very, very good news that in spite of whatever is going on with, headlines coming out from the Trump administration, I am probably seeing the best kind of submissions as well as approval rates coming through in the current administration. So I have to give, credit where credit is due. In fact, last Friday, two of my clients got their, project approved in the fastest time, I would have to say, in 7 months, because in the current law, if a client were to invest into a rural project, they would be considered for expedited processing. So, it's, as much as there is a lot of apprehension and as much as there is a lot of uncertainty going on, there is also a lot of good and positive news coming out for people who are considering the EB-5. And that's why I tell a lot of families who are looking to secure their future and set their children up for success to definitely look at it, EB-5, which is definitely the pathway to permanent residency in the US. And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Shalu. Right, to end our webinar today, I'm going to just go through what we actually do and how we can support you, because you've heard from Christina, you've heard all about the the wonders of the US and its colleges, but also the complexity of its application process and the planning involved. And then when you wrap that up with the EB-5 and how to prepare your children to benefit from the US system, planning is really a key thing. And I think before I go into the last few slides, I cannot stress how important this is. And when we have students and families coming to speak with us, very often one of the first questions is, well, is my child too old? And they'll be speaking to me or Christina when their children are 11 or 12, and we say absolutely not, because whether or not a child goes to the US or elsewhere, we can work with the family to sort of plan their education pathway. And it's particularly relevant for the US because of the complexity of the application and process and the amount of work that has to be done, which is on the student to do before we can craft it into a strong application. And then if you put an application for an EB-5 in the mix as well, with the aim to have permanent residency before applying, then it is very wise to start talking to us at the age when your child is the age of 12 or 13. And the key thing to know is that even if eventually that's not the pathway they take, you still have an EB-5, you still have a green card, and it can be used in future years for a master's, postgraduate, etc. So there are all sorts of ways of doing it, but planning, yes, plan. That's my golden word for today. Now, just to give you a little bit of introduction to our lovely team, you can see there's several of us who are all working with families from all over the world. And all of us have specialities and specialisms in different countries. You can see Christina doesn't just do the US, but she does so many different areas. For us, it's quite ridiculous. But we also have specialism in special educational needs, the US, UK, UAE, Australia, New Zealand, etc., etc. So we can cover pretty much the whole world for our families who are mobile and looking for expertise in different areas. Very importantly, we're completely independent in the advice we give. That's really important to understand. We do not have any paid partnerships with schools and universities because we fundamentally believe that to be able to work with families, we need to be able to give advice that is completely tailored to each family. So depending on where and what you want to study, you would be working with one of our lovely team. Why choose to work with us? Well, not only you can have this, as I've said earlier, you've got this independence. Currently, we sit at 100% success rate because all of our counsellors take so much time to get to know you and your families. We tailor every single application and we identify the right schools or universities. So we are certain that there will be fit within the schools or universities that we counsel to our families. We also have something called the HAPA, the Henley Academic Profiling Assessment. This is an assessment that ensures that we can benchmark your child against international students. It's part of the overview. It's part of everything we need to gather in order to ensure we can best match your child to the type of school or university that works for them. Because we are all ex-educators, Christina comes from a background advisory for, as she said, the last 12 years. I'm a UK qualified teacher. Everyone else is either an ex-head teacher, college counsellor, special educational needs specialist, etc. We have a really deep understanding of children and how best to support them. And very importantly, which is where it really makes sense to discuss this here, is that we are the only advisory where we are able to combine this very powerful combination of expertise in international education alongside the citizenship or residency programs that sit so well alongside this. And as Shalu and Christina have both said, it is absolutely critical, especially in this very unstable and the geopolitical situation we are currently in, to give your child the best possible options post-graduation is really the best gift you can give them, because you are giving them the security of knowing not only they will get an excellent education in the country and university of choice, but they can then access exactly the same opportunities as what we call domestic students. So it's a really powerful combination. Our services, the Henley Academic Profiling Assessment, is the starting point for everything we do. It's an online assessment for 6 to 16-year-olds. It's followed up with a very detailed report that looks at their maths, English, verbal and non-verbal reasoning, and as I've said, benchmarks them with international students, because of course when we're trying to match students, we want to understand how they're going to be doing alongside those children who are effectively their competitors. Then our schools and universities admissions counselling is a sort of core area of our work, and we can work with students or children from 3-4 years old all the way up to adults doing postgraduate degrees. And then our additional services are very much around what our clients are looking for. So we can organise bespoke tours for university. Christina is usually to be found with her clients and our students visiting schools and universities around the world. But also we have, as I've said, a lot of support for children with special educational needs, because we do not just work for students who are going to get into the top 50 universities. We will work with any child with any academic or learning ability, and we will help them to access the best options for them. But it also includes summer programs, summer camps. If we can help a client, if they have a question, if they have there's a service they need, if we can help them, we will. Very quick overview of what we do. Now, if there are any questions, this is a good time to drop them in the Q&A. There's one I would like to ask you, Shalu. We were talking about planning. Planning has come up again. So if you want to go to the States, I've always said 12, 13 is a good time to start. If you know that students are wanting to go, how long do you actually physically work with them, and what would you suggest would be the best starting point to be able to apply as a permanent resident for the US?
Sure. So that's actually, like I said, it's starting to become increasingly common for a lot of, parents who might not necessarily want to be in the application, but they really want to give their child a head start. So just to give a real life example of a case where I did for a family where the parents, are complete high flyers and they still want to, have a good number of years where they want to work in Singapore and derive a lot of, benefit out of what the Singapore environment gives in terms of lower tax, right? So they said, they have an only son and they wanted to give him a head start. And this particular boy is extremely smart and he wanted to do aeronautical engineering, which the US is like the number one. And I think, it's either MIT or Stanford, and Christina can back me up here. But I think these are the basically, so what we did was we worked with the family and, whenever somebody asked me, how long does it take? I said, it really depends on the client, how fast the client can provide documentation in terms of source of funds. That is really how fast we can get the application. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, I did it for a Vietnamese client, and we did it for his 17-year-old son, and it was just for the minor, just for the boy, because the father didn't want to be in the application, and neither did the mother. So we did it, and the parents managed to do the source of funds, and we filed the application in less than 2 weeks. So I think that would have to be a record for me. So really, whenever somebody tells me how long does the processing time, I say it really depends on the clients, but we are here to work with the client in any capacity whatsoever. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Another question for Christina. I wanted to go back, or somebody's just asked about fit, to get a better understanding of the differences in the universities, the colleges in the US. Can you just sort of maybe talk more about how do you work with a student to identify fit, because it's a really core part of how we work. So could you just talk more about what is fit and what do you do when you're working with the student to really get to know them and then be able to suggest the colleges that best suit them?
Sure. Thank you for the question, first of all. Well, I spent so much time today describing fit exactly because it's the number one thing to look at when applying to the US colleges. They are so different in the US. And it's exactly, as I said, it's not only about academics. You need to be very aware of what is the community behind, what are the values behind that particular institution. So obviously, I think the important thing to say is that we don't only work with one institutions or two institutions in terms of our family's applications, right? And I've mentioned how important it is to craft a strategic list of universities, right? So the way I work with every family is that I really want to understand the family dynamics. I want to meet the student to hear from them, what drives their interest to apply, what are their values, what are their dreams. I just kind of like do these coaching sessions with my students. And many of them, before I even go to, given the list or even, starting to advice on any particular university, I want to hear from the family and from the student specifically, what is it about the US that drives them? What do they already know about this system or the universities? Have they actually visited the US and the US institutions? And this is really what forms an understanding for me whether or not a student is really prepared. And then the system behind it really depends on those answers. So as you said, Taz, and as Shalu mentioned, I think it's important to mention that we work with clients and families of any ages and academic capacities. I talked a lot about top US institutions because it's always a question, but it's important to know that there are so many colleges in the US. There are over like 2,000 colleges. And so it's important to know that top 50 universities are really like top 3% of the universities in the country, right? So there are so many. And my idea behind this FIT terminology is really to get to know the student first and foremost, to understand if they are aware of the choices that they are making, or if there is a lot more to be done. And that's why we mentioned this long-term planning, because if I see that a student is not yet familiar with this whole concept or with the universities they've mentioned, we need to take time to get to know them. As I mentioned, through summer programs, through open day and campus tours, visits, because the only way you can really succeed in this application is to make a strong match for the fit that is required. So yeah, I hope this answers the question.
It
But
does.
but exactly, planning is the word today, because on top of all of this complex process that I've been helping my student with during the couple last years, over a decade, right? On top of this, nowadays, we have this complex situation around visa processing times and all of these new issues that we have to address, right? So the only way today is really to plan ahead. But if you find yourself in a situation which we've seen and we completely understand, there have been so many last minute requests, and we do our best to cover all of them. But if you do have that capacity to allow for more time, you'll just have a much smoother and comfortable process.
Yes, completely agreed. Thank you so much, everyone. That's it for the questions for today. Now, on the screen, you can see the contact details for Shalu and myself. Please reach out to us if you have questions you'd prefer to ask outside the webinar, but if you'd like to follow up with a call with me for education, and then for Christina, or Shalu for the EB-5, please get in touch. You can scan for the website, our emails and our phone numbers are there too. So on that, I'm just going to say thank you, everyone. Thank you, Christina and Shalu, for joining me. Thank you for everybody else who've attended today. This is being recorded and will be distributed to all those who've registered and to attendees today. So give us a few days for that and you'll receive it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.